If you're seeing this through recommendations, then hello. Feel free to stick around, but I'm expecting you guys to know the basics of Kamen Rider before watching this video, or at least have watched a video or two of mine, as I'm placing this right after History of Decade. If you want to watch anyway to get the gist of the seasons and my reviews as a sort of quote-unquote introduction to Kamen Rider, then that's okay too. With that being brought up, welcome to the halfway point of the Heisei era. I'd like to take this time to look back at the 11 seasons I covered, along with talking about some extras and giving my afterthoughts. In a way, I'd also like to talk about the history of Kamen Rider. This is simply going to be a general retrospective overview for each season. I do have individual videos for them if you want to hear more. First things first. You're gonna hear me refer to the period between Kamen Rider Kouga and Decade as Heisei Phase 1. Others refer to the seasons past Decade as Neo Heisei, though there's some distaste towards that name since there isn't an Emperor Neo Heisei. There isn't a cyborg called Neo Saban either, but I digress. I personally don't mind any designation, call them parts or even Shin Heisei, but I'll go with Heisei Phase 1 and Phase 2. An official naming scheme hasn't ever been given, and no, the Neo Deca driver doesn't mean anything, certainly not for an entire phase. Now that I think about it, Shin Heisei actually sounds kinda cool. Moving on. Second, I'm gonna give my ratings for each season at the end of their sections. My system is simple. Negative meaning I didn't like it, neutral, it was okay, and positive, I really enjoyed the show. Emphasis on those I's, since they're my opinions. While I can stay objective, I still have personal biases that increase my enjoyment of some seasons over others. One of my favorite phrases is, your opinion matters more than mine. Everyone is different, seasons are subjective, and your videos will get disliked no matter what anyone thinks. However, keep in mind that another one of my favorite phrases is, opinions change over time. These are the ratings that I'm giving them for now. A few will have certainly changed since my last videos, but my general feelings are more or less the same. I do try to keep my views static so we can look back years later and still understand what I'm getting at. Oh, a quick aside. History of Kamen Rider is done in order unless requested by a supporter. Or in one case, I lose a bet. Okay? The seasons you guys request will be done. Alright? Alright. As a third miscellaneous point, yes guys, I've gotten your 100th comment asking what happens to History of Retrospective videos when they get taken down. They've done a pretty good job staying up for the longest time, but just in case any do disappear, I plan to re-upload them with little extras for the trouble. If they're particularly older videos, then I remake them outright from scratch, meaning that they'll take just as long as another History of video. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's start with
Kouga!
Yusuke Godai. The man with 2,000 skills is given the Arkle, a mystical relic that allows him to transform into Kamen Rider Kouga. This was the first season after a long hiatus, and what a return it was. Kouga is all about the characters. If you've ever seen any drama ever, then you'll understand. There isn't any real overarching story aside from fighting the Grongi, aka unidentified lifeforms, so it's the characters that make the show worth watching. Well, that and the amazing action. Surprisingly, I didn't bring up the action all that much, but yeah, the raw emotion of every hit is fantastic. I'm not the biggest fan of the suit, though seeing Kouga in action is wonderful, especially on a bike. As for the first episode of History of Kamen Rider, I apologize. It was a bit rough since I still had my Rock Band microphone and the video was at 480p. What really didn't help was that I didn't know how to get past the copyright bots yet, so I decided to upload it on Facebook, where it only got like 2 views. And it still got taken down. Well, even when things go bad, you keep going. From there, I remade the video and made things more consistent as I started getting used to making these. Watching it a second time certainly helped, as I was able to see just how good the writing held up in the modern day. The teacher character has a couple scenes that really hit home, not just in Japan, but to any viewer. Many of the cast feel real, true to life. This is one of the closest to a quote-unquote grounded henshin hero, and it feels great seeing growth. The police being a big part of the show is a plus to me. I know I'm being extremely generally vague, but that's only because it is a show you really need to experience yourself. I can tell you about Yusuke and Ichijo's friendship for 20 minutes, but that won't do it any justice since I only ever cover the big story beats. It's the scene-to-scene emotion that pushed me to keep watching. I wanted to see Yusuke going through an emotional roller coaster, but I was also interested in knowing more about his friends and what they do in everyday life. That sounds boring in concept, but man, I'd say that some characters and plots are even better than our titular writer. A lot of you are probably used to there being multiple writers in modern seasons, along with power-ups moving the overarching plot along. Which brings me to say that it might be difficult for some viewers to get into this show. It really is closer to a J-drama, and that includes its slower pace. Modern seasons feel like they go at a breakneck speed compared to Kouga. Now, it's not as jarring as a transitional watch from, say, Heisei Phase 2 to Show era, but keep in mind that there are some elements completely different from newer seasons. That's actually a big positive. Kouga is one of a kind, so we should enjoy it and appreciate what it brought, along with its revival of the Kamen Rider series as a whole. It's too bad Joe Kouga won't return. Generally considered one of the best in the series, I can't stress enough that the characters are the best part, and the action shouldn't be missed, especially with that final battle. Kamen Rider Kouga receives a positive.
Agito.
Shoichi Sugami is an amnesiac who's been Kamen Rider Agito for months. He gains allies in the battle against the mystical unknowns with Ryo Ashihara, Kamen Rider Gills, and Makoto Hikawa, Kamen Rider G3, a man-made rider. Together, they investigate who the lords are and why they're targeting specific people. Some will think that Agito is basically part 2 of Kouga due to a couple references in the opening episodes, but it was officially stated by TV Asahi that you can consider it however you wish, though it would be more meaningful to leave Agito as its own thing. While I personally love continuity, I also don't want to feel like Yusuke's fight against the Grongi was for nothing. That aside, Agito built upon Kouga by adding more riders, more drama, and definitely more plot. If it did all that well, that's also up to you. I like the characters here enough and the drama was fine, though what didn't grab me was most of the quote-unquote art. The video remake will cover more of when I say, yeah, I get it. That phrase went through my mind a lot, but others probably won't find problem with it. That said, I don't outright dislike a lot of the artistic choices. Ryo transforming by showing gills behind him is really cool, reminding me of a JoJo stand. Shoichi having a bright light on the Agito belt is iconic. The world building has interesting ideas. Unknowns have a pretty extensive backstory, but you're not getting it within the show except for a quick mural. There is one scene that has to do with the Lord of Darkness, but it doesn't last long and doesn't explain anything other than he exists. Oh yeah, the pacing to me is pretty horrendous too. While there is an overarching story starting from episode 1, it felt like story beats were inconsistent on when they happen. I probably don't have to bring up about subverting expectations, do I? There is still a lot to like. The individual stories are great, the show does look gorgeous with its mystical aesthetic, oh yeah, and the movie is pretty fun. My thoughts were majority negative on my first watch, but the second watch was way better, though not enough to get past this neutral rating.
Yuki.
Shinji Kido is a journalist who gets dropped into the rider battle, where 13 riders fight to the death. The last one standing is granted a wish. That sounds frickin' awesome, but the execution is not what you would expect. We mostly follow 4 main characters and other riders show up sometimes. It's not as bad as that, but again, don't expect an all-out rider battle very often, or at all. There was a plan to have 50 riders, one each episode like Monsters of the Week, but oh well. Even if the idea isn't as fleshed out as I liked, each rider is pretty memorable and the suits are awesome. This is where you'll start seeing more CGI than usual, but the action is still great. With this being character-based, I can't exactly say much without spoiling it all, so that's what the video is for. At the time of this recording, it's still in parts, but when it's remade, it'll all be reduxed into one big history of Ryuki. Alright, one of the most interesting things about Ryuki is that it actually has several alternate endings, but again, probably not what you would expect. They were interesting for the time, and I would love to see more of it through V-Cinemas with modern seasons. Ryuki has 3, or 4 if you count Rider Time, visual endings, and a couple endings through novels and other writings. While they're not the quote-unquote what-if type of endings you'd want, they're all quite interesting to experience. Again, I'm being vague to avoid spoilers. To me, the 3 main aspects I look for in a tokusatsu are the action, story, and characters. Ever since Ryuki, there's another element I'd like to add, the journey to ending. To put simply, if the ending is bad, then a good journey would balance that out, and vice versa. Multiple endings would seemingly change that, but I mostly pay attention to the season itself, side content after, which is why I rarely bring up novels and mangas. Anyway, Ryuki has a lot of good in it. The main writers we follow are all interesting. Some of the side characters are just as great. The conflicts in the writer war are fun. However, I think Ryuki is just okay. Neutral. Dragon Knight. Our second American adaptation has Kid Taylor get dropped into the writer battle of Ventara, where he has to stop other writers and General Xaviax from taking over Earth. After the disaster that was Saban's Masked Rider, Adness Entertainment got the rights to adapt Kamen Rider Ryuki for the West. I personally thought it was a fun show. The characters had fun personalities, the story went in a great momentum, and the action was fantastic, especially since there was a lot more original footage than Ryuki footage. Over the years, Dragon Knight got this feeling of, oh yeah, I remember that. It was pretty fun. Thinking about it again, yeah, it's still a good show. There are some Power Rangers seasons that I enjoyed more than its Sentai counterpart, and with Dragon Knight, I enjoyed it a bit more than other Rider seasons. Of course, I should also bring up how Japan liked it a bit more than Ryuki at the time. I looked at several Japanese forums where people were talking about it and found several liking it quite a bit. If Dragon Knight wasn't so popular, then it wouldn't have gotten extra treatment like an exclusive novel. Side tangent, I'm just one guy working on these videos. I ask around with certain people for some confirmation. I check forums, and I absolutely do not go on the writer wiki anymore, since it's been unreliable and apparently think everything is a reference to everything. Even so, I'm bound to get stuff wrong, and if I do, please let me know. That's one reason these extra videos are being made, and why other videos are reworked so I can fix certain things. Just saying that I give misinformation isn't helping. I do apologize profusely if I do say something wrong. Really, I want these to be better, so I'd appreciate any input. Back to Dragon Knight. It's a shame that it was mistreated by 4Kids Entertainment, leaving the last few episodes to rot on their site. There were plans to continue with a movie or even a season 2, but of course that never happened. The toy sales weren't great, but viewers did enjoy the show. However, they're toy commercials, so no sales mean no money. No money, no show. Winning a Daytime Emmy for its stunt work isn't anything to sneeze at. I just wish the show was treated better, or at least more toys are sold. I can see why viewers would want to tune into Dragon Knight. Its familiarity with Power Rangers, along with something that hasn't been seen by younger generation with Kamen Rider. I've actually heard a few non-tokusatsu YouTubers bring up how they've seen Dragon Knight. It actually blew my mind when this one video game reviewer talked about it out of nowhere. If we never get another adaptation, then I guess it just wasn't meant to be. I'll still enjoy Dragon Knight as we know it. Positive.
5.
An organization known as Smart Brain has created 3 transformation gears, when one of them falls in the hands of Takumi Inui. Now as Kamen Rider Phase, he fights the Orphanox even though it's not his style. This is one of the most character-driven seasons in Heisei Phase 1, and I think that characters are interesting enough to follow for 40-some episodes. Much like Kouga, there isn't really an overall story aside from fighting the Orphanox, and also like Kouga, it's closer to a J-drama. The character motivations come in the form of a love triangle, other writers getting in Takumi's way, and a mystery that has to do with the school that was attacked by Orphanox. If you've heard one thing about Phase, it's mostly how the cast just don't talk to each other, leading to more problems that could have been avoided if they only sat down to say something. Even now, I still don't think that problem is as big as people make it out to be. I even showed scenes where the characters did sit down to share information that matters. I will admit that some problems could have been fixed faster, but again, it wasn't that big a deal. When I bring up aesthetics, I tend to mean how a show looks and in a way, feels. That goes along with writer suits, locations, and so on. Kouga feels realistic, plus it has a darker tone, and that's what I think its aesthetic is. Phase has a similar dark tone and kind of a grimy look. I'm not sure how else to put it. Well, communication issues aside, there's still other problems I read from people online. Some don't like the slow character progression, especially with Kamen Rider Kaiza. They're mostly the same from beginning to end, and while that's not a bad thing, it just feels unsatisfying. Speaking of unsatisfying, the romance is supposed to play a big part, and it gets too convoluted for no reason. Not a lot is explained, and that's not a bad thing either, but like, come on, give us something. Although it did give us an awesome character with Takumi Inui. I love his phrase, I don't have a dream, but I can protect them. Really, Phase is very problematic. But I love it so much. Top 10 favorite season, in fact. Positive.
Blade.
Kenzaki Kazuma works for Board, an agency that created Kamen Rider Blade. One day, their facility gets destroyed by an undead. Kenzaki sees another Kamen Rider with them, and the story goes from there. Here's a season that has one of the most perfect balances of story and character progression, if you can reach that point. Ratings have been decent until now, with the peak reaching Agito. Then when we reach Blade, well, staff changes wouldn't have been made over good ratings. I'll be honest, the first half was quite a slog. I mean, it wasn't the worst thing ever. The action was short but sweet. The characters were there. Okay, it wasn't great, though once the second half kicks in, I felt like it was worth the slow burn. Once it reaches a certain power-up, it feels like characters are pushed more, who get more story to follow, and it all reaches one of the best endings in Kamen Rider to me, which I won't show here for obvious reasons. Out of all the seasons for History of Kamen Rider I've seen so far, this was one of the most difficult to talk about for personal thoughts. I've said several times that episodic seasons are weird for me to discuss because I can only say, yeah, it's fun so many times, and I've echoed before. It's easier to talk about a bad show than a good one. With that, I think Blade is good, at least its second half, and that's enough for me to say positive.
Hibiki.
While on a quick trip to visit family, a young boy meets a stranger named Hibiki, who can transform into Kamen Rider Hibiki. The boy follows him around and learns more about an organization of Oni that fight off the Makumo. Some of you may have noticed a little trend. The longer I make these videos, the more I like the season. At least if that were true. On average, these videos are about an hour in length. Hibiki is 30 minutes. I've been waiting for a video like this to officially say that my favorite season of Kamen Rider is Hibiki. Once again, not much of a plot, but as one of the most character-driven shows, Hibiki is fantastic. Our main character isn't a writer, it's the boy, Osamu. We see the world through his eyes and how he lives his life now that he knows about the organization. Kamen Rider Hibiki is quite unconventional. For one, they're not writers, they're Oni. You might think that Kouga is slow, but Hibiki really takes his time. In a good way. To me, at least. Yeah, I've had plenty of comments saying how much they absolutely don't like the show, including one that was practically an essay. I still think Hibiki is a masterpiece. It's art without being the artsy type in your face. What's there to see is a slice of life about a child who's trying to find his place in the world. Then there's the second half. Much like Blade, Hibiki's production was forced to change, this time due to low toy sales. Locations were moved to the city, certain elements were gotten rid of completely, and Osamu was given a rival, which he absolutely did not need. At all. Not only that, but character motivations became one note, simply because it's a trope, I guess. Of course, that's just me. Plenty of other people prefer the second half since it's closer to what you expect a writer show to have. There's a monster of the week formula, the characters do become archetypes we're familiar with, though I find comfort in watching Hibiki, and I think that's what a lot of people enjoy. It's comfortable watching something you know, and I found comfort in being told that life may be difficult, but it'll be okay. Which is why I'm giving Hibiki a positive.
Kabuto.
The man who will walk the path of heaven, Tendo Soji, is destined for greatness when it's finally time to become Kamen Rider Kabuto and fight the human-mimicking worms. At the same time, an organization named Zect sends out Zectors for more Kamen Riders to appear. Huh. I just realized there are a lot of organizations that create writers. Well, things have been a bit different with Hibiki. Let's get back to something a lot more would enjoy, like a more straightforward story, and writer battles. Third time's the charm, I guess, cause more change happens behind the scenes in this season. It's kinda noticeable at the halfway point since the plot becomes convoluted for no reason, but I still thought Kabuto was a good show. The characters alone are great, and this season even has one of my top writers ever. Top 2, actually. What others didn't like was how perfect Tendo was, to which I'd say the point was missed, but hey, the characters really are great. The continuous story went at a good pace, and other writers showed up at points while contributing to the plot. Sort of. A couple writers are kinda dropped in, but their personalities are so fun with other characters that I really don't mind. These suits are gorgeous too. Can I just say how amazing it is that a lot of Kabuto CGI holds up really freaking well a decade later? I can get past a lot of the strange dialogue because the cast is so wholesome. I just want to enjoy their time together. This one was a shorter video like Hibiki, but Kabuto is one of my favorite seasons. See how the length of time didn't determine my likeness? That should mean Kabuto is a positive.
Den-O!
Ryotaro Nogami is a singularity point, someone who's able to save timeline changes as Kamen Rider Den-O. On his adventure, he comes across 4 Imogen who help him fight off other evil Imogen. As strange as I feel talking about episodic shows, I knew exactly what I wanted to say with Den-O. It's such a great show with happy moments, as well as touching ones. There is a final arc with a plot to follow, but not a lot of people liked it, including myself. You should still watch to the end though. Each arc is beautiful, and I can't even begin to talk about the second writer, who is also my top 2 favorite writers. The writing is one of the best in the series, having very meaningful arcs but still knowing when to have fun. I've had a few comments confused as how the Den-O video was only an hour long when it has like 7 movies. Well, an hour is still a long time. And I talk about what I feel is necessary for the story. With Den-O being episodic, you'd think this would be another short video, but there was so much to say. If you follow me on Twitter, you'd have seen me talk about Den-O way past the video, even going as far as saying that it's now in my top 3 favorite seasons. That's an obvious positive.
Kiba!
Wataru Kurenai grew up with Kiba Bat III, a friendly bat who allows him to become Kamen Rider Kiba. Together, along with the Aozora organization, Wataru fights the Fangire, a race who absorb the essences of humans. One of the most interesting things about the show is how it tells a story through 2 different time periods. That's as far as positive for me as it gets. Kiba has a lot of great ideas, but I was more disappointed by how they handled it here more than Decade. The action was fine, the characters were okay, the story, blah. I get that gothic stories have to do with romance, but man. Heisei asked which series felt like the biggest chore to rewatch. To that, I'll say it was Agito. It was a slog the first time, and while the second time wasn't as bad, I just didn't feel like seeing it all over again. However, adding to that, this was the season that was the biggest chore to watch the first time. I don't want there to be a second time. I appreciate the comments saying that you're okay with my opinion. It means a lot to me. I especially like the ones that ask me to not apologize. That's great, and I couldn't ask for better viewers. However, that didn't stop Kiba from having one of the highest dislike ratios for History of Kamen Rider. That sounds bigger than it really is, and it might not matter in the grand scheme of things, but even a tiny margin means something. I just really don't want to talk about Kiba ever again. Negative.
Decay!
Tsukasa Kadoya. What do those eyes see as he travels through the worlds to destroy them? Our first big anniversary season was a strange one, in terms of its production. What people didn't like about the show is what I actually found a lot of fun. I like the alternate reality worlds, the AR writers, and Tsukasa is my favorite primary writer ever. One of my favorite archetypes are the sarcastic but heroic. There are so many great moments with Tsukasa and his friends through their journey. I just love the main cast. Their journey in the first 9 worlds were fun. Then after that it got weird. Story writers were changed after the Agito arc since the original writer left over creative differences. You can tell the quality fluctuates, and there wasn't much of a consistent vision to get to the end. Toei had a lot on their plate with Rider alone, as Kamen Rider Double was being produced at the same time. Even still, I thought it was fun. Tsukasa Kadoya. What do those eyes see as I give it a positive? Heisei Kamen Rider Phase 1. Now, you may want to know what my favorite Heisei Phase 1 seasons are in order from least to most favorite, so you'll get that in a separate video. I'm so happy and thankful that we got this far. I never thought I'd ever get to make 11 videos and counting up to Heisei Phase 2. Overall, Phase 1 has a soap opera-like style, and while I wouldn't say we'll never have that style again, I would say it's not like what we had. There was more of a sinister and darker tone with seasons like Faiz and Blade. I do like the style of previous shows, and the higher frame rate for older seasons are an experience. Once again, thank you for taking this journey with me, but we still got a lot more to go. With all that being said, I'll see you guys next time as we enter the next phase and count up your sins with Kamen Rider Double.